Hello, hello. I think I'm doing this right. Isn't it amazing that we are living in a time where we are all having to adjust? And I'm proof old dog new tricks because I used to say that I was tech challenged, and I can't really say that anymore. Even though I wouldn't say I'm a tech guru, but I've done things with technology that if you had told me a year ago that I'd be doing, I wouldn't have believed you. So I am here today to talk in this summit about emotional resiliency and mental health in youth. Ironically, since I booked this time, I have sort of changed my business. And I'm going to be honest with you, it's because I can't deal with parents anymore. And I love kids. I love working with kids. I do a emotional resiliency program, and I have kids in that group, and I will continue to do that group because I believe firmly in my program and what I do. But it's really hard getting parents on board. So, this is what I'm going to talk to you about today because it's frustrating to see what's going on out in the world. We know it's happening. We all talk about how it's such an important topic, and yet nobody is willing to do anything about it. And I've seen it all too many times, which is why I am willing to speak out. I am willing to speak and maybe not be the popular opinion on this because kids are dying and we need to address that and we need to do something about it. So, this is what my talk is going to be on today. And when I say youth, I'm looking at the numbers for young people 24 and under because the statistics are staggering. We are dealing with mental illness to a degree that we've never seen before. And part of that, I think, is because we now know how to diagnose and we now know and understand what anxiety can manifest in kids. But I tell the kids I work with all the time, I would not want to trade places with them for anything right now. Um, they are under immense scrutiny. A lot of eyes are on them. A lot of judgment is placed on them. And, especially when we look at a time like we're in a pandemic, there is a lot of anxiety amongst our youth because they're having to shift and move and shift and move and shift and move during this pandemic, not fully understanding, not being given all the information. And so sometimes when we don't give them the information in order to protect them, what they imagine is way worse. And we know that as adults. We'd rather have the information and deal with the devil we know than try and figure out the devil we don't. And so I'm seeing a huge amount of anxiety in kids. And this was a problem prior to COVID, but it's become even more prevalent now. And I certainly see it in the kids that I work with and coach one on one. But I'm also a former teacher. And so I've spent 17 years in a classroom and I saw it on a daily basis. It needs to be addressed. And for some reason, we are afraid to talk about mental illness. Thank you, Tanya. It is very true. It's unfortunate. We should be able to talk about mental illness the same way we talk about physical illness. We are not equipped, I think, or perhaps we're afraid it's like Voldemort. If you say it, he will come. So, you talk about mental illness, well, then it'll happen. So let's just not talk about it. Let's not talk about suicide rates because that's just not going to happen to my family. But that's what every family says until it does happen. And I have spoken to hundreds of parents who have lost children to suicide. And it is heartbreaking. And almost every single one of them will tell you that they never would have guessed that their kid was dealing with something. Because suicidal thoughts, depression, doesn't always show the way we think it's going to show. We think in order to see that somebody's depressed, well, they're going to look sad all the time. They're never going to smile. They're never going to laugh. And well, surely we could tell that because, they're not going to want to do anything. But that's not the case. And when we look at people like Robin Williams, how many people knew he was depressed? Because every time we saw him, he was happy go lucky, he was funny, and he kept us going. So we need to doesn't mean that everything is okay. And oftentimes to lose a child is the unthinkable. Um, I witnessed my mom lose a child. My brother died by suicide. And that tore us apart. This is how I know and what this is like. And as a teacher and having been surrounded by kids for most of my adult life, working with them, I can tell you there is a lot that parents are in denial about. A lot. Which is part of the reason why I got out of teaching. So we need to start addressing what the elephant in the room is. Because there's a message from all these parents who lost kids to suicide. And they've asked me to put it out there, to speak on their behalf, to let parents know that they were those parents who said, oh, my kids are fine. They don't need that. They don't need help. And that's what I found in trying to talk to them about the program that I have, which I call Emotional Resiliency Mastery. Their responses were always, oh, that is so needed. There are so many kids that need that, but not my kids. My kids don't need that. They're confident. They're good. And so these parents who have lost children have asked me to reach out and say to people, that's what they thought too. And if they could go back and do it all again, right? Hindsight is 2020. You start looking back and going, oh, I didn't put two and two together. I didn't realize that they weren't coping as well as I thought they were. So there are signs, but they're not those beacon neon lights flashing that we expect them to be. Anxiety manifests in so many different ways in youth, much different than how it manifests in adults. And this is also something we don't know, and it's not something we're taught. Anxiety manifests as physical illness. Kids will say that their stomach is upset, or they've got pain in their stomach, because the brain and the gut are hugely related. Oh, there's my dog. So what happens is we tend to think when kids come to us and say, oh, my tummy's upset, or my tummy, like I'm having pain in my stomach, we're like, oh, did you eat something bad? Is it flu-like symptoms? We tend to think on the physical, which is why we need to start thinking outside of the box. And when it becomes more and more that we're seeing these types of symptoms coming up, we need to go, maybe I need to look a little deeper. I just noticed it's March 11th, 11:11 a.m. my time. lucky numbers, angel numbers for those of you who believe in it. Um, so I'm going to talk a little bit about my niece because my niece lost her dad to suicide, and she has struggled. She was 7 years old when my brother died, and we had to keep a close eye, and it was a complicated relationship. My brother was fighting demons, and ultimately his battle ended with his choice to die. And there was a 7 year old we had to explain this to. And nobody knows this either. When you look at how do you tell a 7 year old that her dad chose to die, and to tell her the manner in which he chose to die, you would want to protect her, so you wouldn't want to tell her. But we contacted professionals because we needed to know what the best way would be to tell a child not just that they lost a parent, but they lost a parent to suicide. And I was told by a grief counselor that we had to tell her everything. And so we were shocked because we had a hard enough time digesting that information. How do you tell a 7 year old? But the grief counselors told us that we had to tell her because she needed to grieve it. And if she didn't, she would end up finding out the truth later on when she was a teenager, and then would resent us for keeping that information from her. So these are all things that we don't know until we're in it. And so my philosophy is, let's talk about what's uncomfortable before it becomes really uncomfortable, before we end up in a place that is beyond anything that we can comprehend. My niece has dealt with anxiety and has dealt with depression ever since. And understandably so, she's been processing how her father could abandon her, how to live without her dad. So we've always been very open in discussing it when she was ready. We never forced anything upon her, but there were some emotional resiliency skills we had to teach her. And this is something that I've been teaching for 15 years. And it was needed before I knew and understood anything I did about suicide and what's happening. But as a teacher, I saw more and more that suicide rates were going up amongst youth. I was invited on a panel for educators to talk about mental illness in the school and implementing programs in schools to make kids aware and sensitive to these issues so that they could recognize it within each other as well. And there are teachers that are at their wits' end because they are dealing with multiple suicides in their schools on a yearly basis. And I listen to teachers, especially in reservation schools. I'm in Canada, so there are teachers in northern Canada who are dealing with a population that's very different than we are in the south, more populated areas. And they're dealing with multiple suicides in the school per year. There's not the grief counseling available in public education to deal with this properly. And unfortunately, kids witness and see this happening, and then what happens is what's called cluster suicide. So it's like it gives somebody who's already been having those suicidal thoughts the strength to carry out that suicidal ideation. And I live in a very small tourist town. And when I first moved back here, it is my hometown. When I first moved back here, there were 3 suicides at the high school here. in a 4-month period. This blew my mind. And I knew that if that could happen in a small populated place, imagine what's happening in the metropolitan cities. Emotional resiliency is something that we as adults lack. And my philosophy is I need to get to the kids to help them to be proactive in getting them on a path that no matter what life throws at them, they will be able to cope. Suicide rates right now are such that there is a suicide every 40 seconds somewhere in the world. We should not accept that as a number. That should not be acceptable. Suicide prevention is what we should be focusing on. Mental health is what we should be focusing on. That should be our proactive duty to make sure that we are all on a path to staying mentally healthy. We talk all the time about staying physically healthy. Why are we not talking about staying mentally healthy? We don't address it until it's too late. It's already mental illness. And what people don't understand is it's so linked to physical being, because mental illness most of the time is related to an injury in the brain. It's a chemical imbalance. It's something physical that is creating the mental illness. That people with PTSD, and there are far more people with PTSD than have been diagnosed, people with PTSD or CPTSD, that actually becomes a physical illness. If you look at the MRI readings of a brain of people with PTSD, you can see the physical dysfunction that is happening in their brain. That is not a suck it up, you'll get better. That is a lifetime sentence. And I know because I'm a PTSD survivor. So we need to start being proactive so that we don't have people saying, I'm a suicide survivor, I'm a PTSD survivor. I spent years in groups with people who lost family to suicide or friends to suicide. And I have talked to young people who were involved in shootings in schools who ended up with PTSD. And do you know what was done for those kids who witnessed their friends or teachers dying in a school shooting? Nothing was done for them. They had grief counseling, but it wasn't with somebody who specialized in trauma. And it actually provoked the PTSD and made it worse, which resulted in that specific kid that I talked to, it provoked that kid to want to die herself because she didn't have the support that was necessary. So we are responsible. We are the ones that need to make change. We are the only ones who can make change. And so we do need to talk about these things. And so this is my goal, and this is why I work with tweens and teens, because in my eyes, they're at highest risk, right? When you can set them on a path of learning how to cope with their anxiety, cope with the stress of what they're dealing with, whether it's at home, at school, or both, then you are giving them the tools that they need to move forward in their life and know that no matter what comes at them, they will be able to handle it. They will have things in place that will help them either detonate and get rid of or calm and be able to cope. So what I do in my program with these kids it's a 12-week program, and we address things like mindset, how to shift mindset. We talk about positive self-talk and how that we owe it to ourselves to raise ourselves up instead of push ourselves down. We are so accustomed to saying silly things like, I'm so stupid. Ah, I'm so klutzy. Ah, I can't do anything. Ah, right? And even in jest, it's still something that we are hearing. It's something that we are telling ourselves, and our brain goes, okay, that must be truth. It's about teaching these kids to dream again, to not accept mediocrity as their norm, that there is a better life for them out there. They just have to want it. And what can they do about it? They can dream, they can visualize. What do you want more than anything else in this world? Let's put a vision board together. That's where I'm at with my group right now. And they didn't know how, because they were like, oh, but that's too expensive. And I kept having to say to them, there's no expectation here and there's no limitation. If you want a Porsche XSE, whatever, souped up $200,000 car, then put it on your dream board, because that's what it is. It's a dream board. It's not a reality board. It's a board to show you the things that really get you excited and really get you going. And they're so used to having to dumb down what they truly want that all of a sudden they're stuck in a world where they can't really get anything that they desire. They have to accept reality and get what they get. And I've seen kids with no aspiration to do more, to be more, to try for more even. Hi, Jenny. Oh, that's awesome, Tanya. I love that you do that with your kids. Are you talking about the vision board? Yes. That's amazing, right? We should be, but I mean, not all parents are equipped to do that. We, of course, as entrepreneurs, we work so hard on our own mindset, our own emotional well-being, that we know how to do that. And in turn, we can do that with our kids. But not all parents are as evolved as that, right? They are just trying to get through every day because they haven't been given the tools to cope. They haven't been given those tools and the emotional resiliency to be able to bounce back and to handle when things aren't going well. So why should we expect kids to? This is something that needs to be taught. It's not innate. We learn to live the way our parents lived. We get our limiting beliefs because of what our past ancestors have told us. I come from immigrants. My mom moved to Canada from Italy with my grandparents when she was very young. And so the immigrant mentality is, you be grateful for what you get. You get a job in a factory and you have a stable income. You be grateful that that's what you have. Get a job, stay in that job, because it's better than what you came from. So I had a really hard time shifting my mindset to be to want to own my own business, to want to be my own boss, right? I had to explain to my grandfather why I wanted to go to university, because he didn't understand I had a good job working in a grocery store. And I had to explain to him, I don't want to be a cashier for the rest of my life. And he didn't understand that, because to him, there was a good job. I had benefits. I had all these things. Absolutely. It was great for what I did it for. I did it in university, and it helped me through university, but it wasn't my life passion. It wasn't my dream. But being an immigrant, they didn't understand dreams. They were just happy to be living a life of freedom, or to be living a life that was better than where they were. And so we put all these ways of growing up on our kids because it's what we know. And then kids don't understand why they feel the way they do, or they feel stifled or suffocated, and they have a very hard time being able to dream. And I started noticing back when I first started teaching in 2003, I started noticing because I'd ask kids, what do you want to be when you grow up? Most times the answer I got was, I don't know. Don't tell me you don't know a kid that answers, I don't know. It's that nonverbal, I don't know. I don't know. And I thought, what do you mean you don't know? Because when I was in grade 4, grade 5, you can look at my school book and it had the question, what do you want to be when you grow up? Every year was something different. And if it wasn't one thing I wrote down in that book, it was like five. And I was modeling it after my role models. I want to be a hairdresser like my mom. Oh, my mom went to school, she became a nurse. I want to be a nurse now. I want to be a doctor. I want to be a veterinarian like my grandfather. So my other grandfather, just to be just to be clear. Um, so I was noticing kids really weren't thinking about what they wanted. They were thinking about all that they should expect. Most of them thought that they were going to grow up working, for minimum wage at some job because they were watching their parents struggle, and they felt that that was their future too, that there was no way to get out of that thinking. Jenny, I'm just reading what you're writing. Living in a box sealed by their mindset and what they were taught and the traumas they went through. Absolutely. Absolutely. Um, we carry the burdens of our family from our ancestors. And until we can recognize their mentality and shift our own, then we are stuck carrying that burden forever. And so, what I try to teach kids is that they are not their parents. And, whether their parents are successful or working a job because it's a job, they have an opportunity to change the trajectory of their own lives. That they need to start taking charge of where they want to go. And they need to dream big. And the one thing that bothers me so much, and again, remember I was a teacher, is you see in classrooms and in kids' bedrooms, you see these posters. We put up these posters that say, you can do anything. The world is your oyster. You can be anything. Just do it. And then the minute they say, I want to be an astronaut, we leap on them and we are, you can't be an astronaut. You're not good enough at math. Do you know the science grades you have to get in order to be an astronaut? Do you know what the odds are that you would ever go to space? It's like 1 in 10,000 or well, I don't know what the statistics are. I'm making that up. But we tend to jump on them and say, no, you can't do that. Be realistic. Go to university and get a job. We are all in this job mentality. Education is teaching kids to be in a job mentality. Go to post-secondary education, spend a ton of money to learn something, and then go and get a job in it. Oh, well, any of us who've been to university know it's not that easy, because we get this piece of paper that say we have a BA, and oh, look, everybody else has a BA too. So I'm competing with everyone again for these jobs. I can't find a job, so I'll just take anything. Right? I witnessed that with my ex-husband. We both went to university. We were at the same university, and he graduated as an urban and regional planner. Didn't work in the field, ended up in the financial industry. I can't tell you the number of people that I went to university with who changed their majors 2, 3, 4 times because we force kids to make a decision before they truly know what they want, what they're passionate about. And so before you know it, you've racked up all these bills in going to university because you're told that's what you do, and we don't ask them, what do you want to do? And we don't get them used to and accustomed to talking about those things as a child. So when you ask them, what do you want to be when you grow up? I'm not surprised that they say, I don't know. Because we don't teach them that it's okay to dream. Because that kid who wants to be an astronaut, awesome. What do you need to do to get there? Let's put a plan together. Now, that kid may not get to be an astronaut, but when they follow that path and they follow that passion, it's going to take them down a road that might veer them off, but they're still going to be following that passion, and they're still going to be given opportunities that are going to light them up. Why aren't we teaching this in our classrooms? Why aren't we teaching this to kids? Why have we said that the only way to survive is to go to school, get a good education, and do something that's going to make you a lot of money? Doesn't matter if it makes you happy. Go to med school, be a doctor. And then the number of people that I know who get to my age and go, I never wanted to be a lawyer. I wanted to be an artist. And then they leave and start pursuing something that they're passionate about. Nice, Jenny. See, a law degree. And now you work in a chippy. Awesome. And I want to ask you, I bet you're happier, right? We don't follow what our heart desires. We follow what society tells us to do. And so think of kids absorbing all these expectations. It's no wonder that they're dealing with mental illness, because they feel life is hopeless. They don't get to choose. We seem to be choosing for them. And when they don't choose what we want them to do, they feel they've failed us. So giving kids the resources and the coping mechanisms to be confident and to stand firmly in what it is that they desire, to do things that light them up. Ask any 4-year-old who is obsessed with dinosaurs. Ask them any question to do with dinosaurs. They will tell you everything. How did they know all that information? They had a desire to learn it. They don't read yet, so it's not like they read a book and went, hey, I know everything about dinosaurs. But they learned in whatever way they could about those dinosaurs. And they can tell you what they ate, how they lived, who got along with who, what dinosaur was, at what time period. They can tell you everything, and they're 4. Or they can tell you geographically, all the different countries in the world, or the capitals of every country, or the capitals of every state. It's because it lights them up. It's something they want to know. Imagine if our education system was like that. And it wasn't, no, you must learn math, reading, and arithmetic. Oh, no, wait, arithmetic and math are the same thing. Anyway, you get my point. The 3 R's, whatever, reading, writing, and arithmetic. We tell them this is what they must learn. But what if we said, what lights you up? What inspires you to learn? And we get kids to do that. Do you not think that reading would follow naturally because that person wants to learn more about whatever that is that lights them up? Would we not expect that we can give a basic foundation in math when we light them up? Imagine what our world would look like if we spent time trying to ignite a passion in these kids versus telling them what they must do. This is where we can make a difference. This is where I will speak out against public education, and not because I don't think public education is important. I think we veered away from what teachers are best at. When a government runs public education and a government that knows nothing about what happens in a classroom, this is where we're failing our kids. People should be running the public education system who are experts in public education. And I say this with a huge amount of venom for our Minister of Education here in Ontario, because he never stepped foot in a public school. He went to private school his whole life. And I've worked in both. I've worked in private schools, I've worked in public schools. I can tell you they are not the same. So we have a responsibility to help these kids find their way. And this is my goal in the program that I do with these kids, is to show them that they don't have to say yes to what their teachers are telling them, because their teachers are telling them things that they've been told they must tell kids. When funding is given to schools because of standard testing, ugh, that drives me nuts. It tells us nothing. But what it does is it forces teachers to shove information down the throats of these kids so that they can make sure that they have money to buy classroom supplies and things that are necessary for schools. And all it does is teaches kids to regurgitate memorized information. It shows nothing of what their ability is. It shows nothing of what they're capable of. So until we start making these changes, we need to make sure that kids are equipped with the tools that they need to be able to handle all this, I'm going to say it, shit that we throw at them. So teaching kids emotional resiliency is probably one of the most important things that we teach them. Yes, Jenny. 10 years in education because of funding cuts and paper bullshit. Yeah. Because teachers can't teach anymore. It is all about all the BS. And I'm sitting here as a former teacher through this pandemic, watching my friends work themselves to like beyond anything, and they're vilified by our governments. They're vilified. Well, they're vilified by the Conservative government here in Canada. And I can't stand by anymore. And this is why I'm glad I'm not a teacher anymore, because I do have a voice. So I've been very vocal about how I feel about that, because we're forgetting that teachers are experts in that area and they love working with kids most times. Not everybody. Not everybody's perfect, right? We have doctors who we know shouldn't be doctors because they don't really like what they're doing. But it's very rare. There are more teachers that love their job and are passionate about what they can provide their kids. And they do so by funding their classrooms out of pocket. I spent at least $2,000 a year in my own class, of my own money in my classroom. At least. And then we tell teachers to stop whining. You're lucky you get all those holidays. Generally, the public doesn't know what teachers go through. And I've always said, you know what, go and volunteer in a classroom for a week and you'll see a totally different side. I taught in a kindergarten classroom for a week because I was at a private school and it was a Jewish holiday. And so we were understaffed and I had to go help in the JK classroom, which taught me, one, I didn't want to teach JK in kindergarten because those teachers go through so much. They're so exhausted at the end of the day. They love what they do, but most times people can't handle their 2, 3, 4 kids at home. Why do they think teachers have it easy when there's 25, 30, sometimes almost 40 kids in a classroom? So, it's hard for me to encapsulate all of this in a 40-minute talk. I'm just giving you sort of the tip of the iceberg about what this is. But there's so much that needs to change, and we need to start speaking out. We need to start holding our governments accountable because every child is deserving of an education. And every child is deserving of an impassioned education. And every teacher deserves to teach in a way that feels authentic and makes them feel like they are doing right by those kids. And I can tell you right now, there's not a lot of that happening right now because more and more they're being pushed down, pushed down, pushed down, pushed down. It's not about teaching kids anymore. It's about class control. It's about chaos control. So, this is why I value in being able to help kids, but I have a really hard time dealing with the parents. So, I still do this program. Um, I don't actively set out to talk to parents much about it anymore because for a good part of a year, all I heard is, oh, my kids don't need that. And even though I would try to explain, they're like, oh, yeah, but my kid's not suicidal. No, my kid's fine. But oh, it's so needed. I know so many kids who could use it. So I do it as this is my passion project. This is what I want to do to help kids in my own way. And this is what I do with people, adults even. I throw it into my practice. I'm a voice specialist, so I work with entrepreneurs on their voicing, becoming the voice in the face of their business. And part of what I do, it's not just about speaking, it's about working on some of these emotional resiliency tools to help find their voice. So I'm a little sneaky that way. I've always done that underhandedly. Yeah, you're learning to sing, but let's throw in some confidence building in there as well. Um, oh, Jenny, I would love that. We could still have coffee just on Zoom. So thank you for listening to me. I feel like this was a rant more than it was a talk, but you can see how passionate I am about kids and just doing right by them. And part of that is watching my niece and what she went through. And part of it is the 17 years I spent working in schools and watching what kids in all economic situations were dealing with. And I can tell you it has nothing to do with money because I worked in some pretty rough inner city public schools and I worked in private schools where money was not an issue. The problems are universal. Money has nothing to do with it. So, how do we make change? We speak out. How do we make change possible? We speak out. So I speak out. I'm the voice for kids because they don't have one. I'm the voice for teachers because they can't for fear of, losing their job or reciprocation. Be the change. Yes, Jenny, be the change you want to see in the world. And that's what I'm doing and that's what I'm spreading. So thank you for being present with me. Thank you for listening. Um, and thanks for all that you're doing in the world to make it a better place too, because I know so many of you are impassioned in what you do to help other people. Entrepreneurs are in a business of servitude. It's about helping others. And we get to celebrate wins when we see other people celebrate wins. So thank you. I am grateful that I got this opportunity. And I am grateful for those who were here and those who will see it after. I feel blessed. So thank you so much. And I can't wait to see others and what they're talking about. So break a leg, as we say in theater. Um, and until the next time.